The rain fell softly over the empty town of Aaronsfield, a place where time seemed to have stopped long ago. The streets were filled with puddles that reflected the dull glow of flickering street lamps. Broken windows whispered stories of people who had left, and the wind carried the faint sound of loneliness through the narrow alleys. It was late at night when Mira walked down the street, her boots splashing through the shallow water. She carried a small canvas bag slung over her shoulder, and her long black hair clung to her face, heavy from the rain. Her eyes, deep amber in color, looked calm yet distant, like someone who had lived 100 lives and lost something in each one. The people who had seen her before called her the Deathworld girl. It was not a name she chose. It was a name given to her by those who whispered about her in fear. They said she had come from the wastelands beyond the city walls, a place known as the Deathworld, where no law existed and survival was rare. No one who went there ever returned. No one except her. Mira never confirmed the rumors. She never denied them either. She just lived quietly, fixing things in the old workshop near the docks, avoiding questions and walking home alone every night. That night, as the rain continued to fall, she noticed something unusual. The sound of footsteps behind her. They were heavy and steady, not the sound of someone casually walking, but of someone following her on purpose. At first, she ignored it. Aaronsfield had its share of thieves and desperate souls, but after a few more steps she slowed down, pretending to look at the streetlights. The footsteps slowed too. A faint smile crossed her face. She spoke without turning around. "If you're going to follow me," she said softly, her voice calm and clear, "at least do it with a reason." The footsteps stopped. Then came a voice, low, trembling slightly. "Turn around." Mira stood still for a moment, the rain dripping from her coat. Then she turned slowly. There, standing a few steps away, was a young man. His face was pale, his eyes filled with something between pain and anger. His hands shook as he held a gun pointed straight at her chest. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the rain hitting the pavement. Finally, he said, "You're Mira, right?" She nodded slightly. "Yes, who are you?" His voice cracked as he spoke. You killed my brother." Mira blinked. She didn't seem surprised, only quiet. "Your brother?" "Yes," he said, his voice louder now, full of emotion. "He went to the Deathworld 3 years ago. People said he met a girl there, a girl with amber eyes and a scar on her wrist. He never came back. Only you did." Mira's eyes softened, but she didn't look away. She pulled up the sleeve of her coat slightly, revealing a faint scar on her wrist. The man's hand tightened around the gun. "So it's true," he said bitterly. "It was you." "Maybe," she replied calmly. "But the Deathworld takes lives every day. Not everyone who dies there dies because of me." He shook his head, his voice breaking. "Don't lie to me. He trusted you. He told me about you before he left. You promised him safety, and you let him die." For a moment, silence filled the air. Mira lowered her eyes as if remembering something far away. Then she looked at him again. "Maybe I did promise that," she said quietly. "But promises mean nothing when the world decides otherwise." Her words only seemed to make him angrier. He stepped closer, the gun trembling in his hand. "You took everything from me. You took my brother. You destroyed my family. I waited 3 years for this moment. You deserve what's coming." Mira didn't move. Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. "If killing me brings you peace," she said, "then do it. But I promise you, it won't." He hesitated. The rain fell harder now, soaking both of them. His finger hovered over the trigger, but something in her eyes stopped him. There was no fear there, no hatred, only a quiet sadness, as if she had already faced death too many times to care anymore. Finally, she tilted her head slightly and said, "You done?" The words were soft, almost teasing, but there was no cruelty in them. Just tiredness, the kind of tiredness that comes from carrying too much pain for too long. He frowned, confused. "What did you say?" She adjusted her wet hair calmly. "I said, are you done pointing that thing at me? You've been standing there for 5 minutes. Either pull the trigger or put it away." Her calmness unnerved him. He took a step back, unsure. "You think this is funny?" he said. "No," she replied. "I just think life's too short to waste on revenge. I've seen what it does to people. It eats them from the inside until there's nothing left." He looked down for a moment, struggling with the weight of his anger. Then he raised the gun again, as if forcing himself to remember why he was there. Before he could say another word, a sudden noise came from behind. A sharp, metallic click. Mira's expression changed instantly. She whispered one word under her breath. Down. The man didn't move fast enough. A gunshot broke the silence. He fell to the ground, clutching his shoulder in pain. The weapon in his hand dropped and slid across the wet street. From the shadows behind him, two figures stepped out. They wore black uniforms, their faces half covered by masks. On their sleeves was a silver insignia, a circle with 3 lines crossing through it. Mira knew that symbol well. It belonged to the Syndicate, the group that controlled the Deathworld's borders. One of them spoke into a small device. We've located the target. The girl's here. Confirming identity. Mira's heart pounded, but her face remained calm. She knew this was coming. The Syndicate never left things unfinished. She crouched beside the injured man, who looked at her in confusion and pain. Who are they? He asked weakly. They're not here for you, Mira said softly. They're here for me. He tried to move, but she held him down gently. Stay still, she said. If you want to live, listen to me. The Syndicate agents began to spread out, their boots splashing through puddles as they approached. One carried a rifle, the other a scanner device that hummed quietly. Mira stood up slowly, her eyes sharp and focused. Her calmness was gone, replaced by something fierce and cold. One of the agents spoke. Miravos, you've been ordered to return to the Deathworld. Come quietly and we won't make this worse. Mira gave a short, humorless laugh. You already made it worse the day you sent me there. Without warning, she pulled a small dagger from her boot. The agents raised their guns instantly, but she moved before they could react. She threw the dagger at the nearest one, striking his shoulder. He cried out and stumbled back. The other agent fired, but Mira ducked behind a broken car, dragging the wounded man, the one who had come to kill her, with her. Bullets hit the metal, sparks flying in the rain. Why are you helping me? The man gasped. You don't even know who I am. Mira's voice was steady, though her eyes were full of emotion. Because I've already seen too much death. Yours won't change anything. She peeked over the car. The first agent was still down, the second advancing cautiously. Mira pulled a small object from her bag, a flash device she had built herself. She pressed a button, tossed it toward the agent, and a bright, white light exploded across the street. The man cried out, blinded, and fell back. Mira didn't waste a second. She grabbed the stranger's arm and pulled him toward the alley. Come on, she said firmly. You'll bleed out if we stay here. He followed, stumbling as she led him through the narrow passageways of Aaronsfield. The sound of shouting grew faint behind them. Finally, they reached an old storage building near the docks. Mira kicked the door open and guided him inside. The air smelled of dust and rusted metal. She tore a piece of cloth from her coat and pressed it against his wound. You'll be fine, she said quietly. He looked at her, pain and confusion written all over his face. You saved me, even though I tried to kill you. Mira met his gaze, her eyes tired but kind. You didn't know the truth, she said softly. Your brother didn't die because of me. He died because he tried to save me. He stared at her, speechless. What? But she didn't answer. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked out into the rain. Her reflection in the glass looked like a ghost, someone caught between life and memory. Outside, the faint lights of the Syndicate's patrols moved across the distant street. She knew they would come again. They always did, she whispered to herself. You done? As if speaking not to the man, not to the world, but to fate itself. The night in Aaronsfield was still heavy with rain, but inside the old storage building, time seemed to slow. The sound of drops hitting the roof echoed softly as Mira pressed a strip of cloth against the man's bleeding shoulder. His face was pale, his breathing rough, but he was alive. She tied the cloth tightly and leaned back against a wooden crate. You should be fine, she said in a calm voice. The bullet didn't go deep. The man winced as he sat up, supporting himself with his good arm. Fine, he muttered weakly. You call this fine? Mira allowed a small smile to appear on her face. I've seen worse. For a moment, they both stayed quiet. The only sound was the faint whistling of the wind through the cracks in the wall. He looked at her carefully. The rain outside made her hair glisten faintly, and the dim light from the broken lamp painted soft shadows across her face. She looked peaceful, but there was something behind that calm, something hidden and heavy. Finally, he spoke again. You said my brother tried to save you. What did you mean by that? Mira didn't answer right away. She looked out the small window, watching the raindrops race down the glass. Her voice, when it came, was low and steady. Your brother's name was Aaron, wasn't it? The man's eyes widened. You remember him. I remember everything, Mira said quietly. The Deathworld doesn't let you forget. He swallowed hard. Then tell me what happened to him. Mira nodded slowly, then sat down on the cold floor across from him. Her eyes seemed to drift far away, as if the memories she carried were still too close to the surface. 3 years ago, the Deathworld was a place where the air itself felt poisoned, dry, hot, and full of the smell of burnt metal. It wasn't a world meant for the living. It was where the Syndicate sent people they didn't want to exist anymore. Mira had been one of those people. She had no family left, no home, no name that anyone remembered. She was thrown into the Deathworld because she had escaped the Syndicate's control once before. Out there, she learned to survive in the dust and silence, surrounded by broken machines, wild storms, and people who would trade anything, weren't even their souls, for one more day alive. It was there she met Aaron Hale, the man's brother. He wasn't like the others. He had hope. He had come looking for something, not just trying to stay alive. He said he was searching for his sister, who had disappeared into the Deathworld months before. He refused to believe she was gone. Mira remembered how he found her near the ruins of an old power station. She was wounded, her leg cut badly after a fall. He could have ignored her, most people would have, but he didn't. He stayed. He treated her wound. He shared his food with her. I thought he was foolish, Mira said quietly, remembering. Nobody helps anyone in the Deathworld, but he did. He said saving someone else's life helped him feel human again. The man, whose name she still didn't know, listened silently, his eyes fixed on her. Mira continued, her voice steady but filled with feeling. We traveled together for almost a month. He told me about his family, about you. He said you were younger than him, always getting into trouble, always trying to act brave. He laughed when he spoke about you. The man's expression softened a little, though he tried to hide it. One night, Mira went on, we were ambushed by Syndicate scouts. They were searching for survivors who had escaped their experiments. Aaron fought them. He was brave. Maybe too brave. One of them fired at me and he... She stopped, taking a breath. Her hands clenched slightly. He pushed me out of the way. He took the bullet that was meant for me. He fell before I could even reach him. The man's face went pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Mira's voice softened even more. I tried to save him, but the Syndicate was closing in. He made me promise to keep running. He told me to live. So I did. She looked down at her hands. But living isn't the same as surviving. Some nights I wished I hadn't kept that promise. The man looked at her, seeing her not as a monster but as someone broken, someone carrying the same grief he did, only for longer. Finally, he whispered, You're telling the truth, aren't you? Mira met his eyes. If I wasn't, you'd already be dead. He nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. The anger inside him began to fade, replaced by confusion and guilt. He leaned back against the wall, trying to process everything. I thought you killed him, he said softly. For 3 years I believed that. I know, Mira said. The Syndicate wanted you to believe that. They erase the truth just like they erase everything that doesn't fit their story. He frowned. Why? Why would they do that? Mira looked out the window again. Because Aaron wasn't supposed to be there. He found something he shouldn't have. Something about what the Syndicate was really doing in the Deathworld. That's why they hunted him. That's why they still want me. She stood up and walked toward the window, pulling the curtain slightly. The rain had slowed, but faint red lights moved through the streets. The Syndicate's patrol drones. They won't stop, she said quietly. Not until they erase every trace of us. The man stood too, wincing from his wound. Then we leave the city. There has to be somewhere they can't reach. Mira shook her head. There's nowhere safe. Not anymore. He stared at her for a moment. You could have left me there to die, he said. Why didn't you? She turned to look at him, her eyes filled with quiet sadness. Because your brother once said that saving someone's life is the only way to stay human. I guess I wanted to believe that too. Her words hung in the air, simple yet heavy. For the first time, he smiled faintly. My name's Leon, he said after a pause. Leon Hale, Mira nodded. Then thank you, Leon Hale. For not pulling the trigger when you had the chance. He gave a small, tired laugh. I don't think I could have done it. Not after seeing your face. Good, Mira said softly. Because there's still something I need to do and I can't do it alone. Hours passed. The rain slowed and the distant sound of thunder faded. Leon slept against a crate, his wounded shoulder wrapped tightly. Mira sat near the window watching the horizon slowly turn gray with dawn. Her mind was full of memories she wished she could forget. Aaron's final moments. The fire, the screams, and the message he had whispered to her before he died. Find the truth. Don't let them bury it. Mira reached into her bag and pulled out a small metal chip, no larger than a coin. It had strange markings on it, a design the Syndicate used for its encrypted data. That chip was the reason Aaron had died, the reason she had been hunted for 3 years. When Leon woke, the sky outside was pale blue. He looked better, though tired. You didn't sleep, he said, noticing her still by the window. I don't sleep much, Mira replied. Bad dreams. He nodded slowly. So what now? Mira showed him the metal chip. It's what your brother died for. The Syndicate wanted it destroyed, but he hid it before they caught us. It contains proof. Everything they've done in the Deathworld. The experiments, the disappearances, the truth. Leon's eyes widened. Then we can expose them. Maybe, Mira said. If we live long enough to try. Before they could say more, a loud noise echoed outside and the sound of engines. Mira's head snapped up. She looked out the window and saw black vehicles moving through the streets, heading toward the docks. They found us, she whispered. Leon struggled to his feet. What do we do? Mira grabbed her bag and her dagger. Her voice was calm but urgent. We run. She helped him up and they slipped through the back door just as the Syndicate vehicle stopped in front of the building. Shouts echoed through the rain again, followed by the sound of boots. Mira led Leon through the maze of narrow alleys. The city around them was waking up, though most people pretended not to see the soldiers. In Aaronsfield, survival meant silence. As they ran, Mira spoke quickly. There's an old train line at the edge of town. It hasn't been used in years. If we can reach it, we can get to the Outlands. The Outlands? Leon asked, breathing hard. She nodded. A place even the Syndicate fears. They turned a corner only to stop suddenly. A patrol stood ahead of them. The soldiers raised their rifles. Mira pushed Leon behind a wall. Stay down. He wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She stepped out into the open, her hands raised, rain dripping from her hair. Her amber eyes glowed faintly in the morning light. The leader of the patrol pointed his weapon at her. Mira Voss, surrender and maybe we'll let the boy live. She smiled sadly. You really don't know me, do you? Before he could react, she moved, swift, silent. Like a shadow, the sound of gunfire filled the air, mixing with thunder once more. And when the smoke cleared, Mira stood alone, breathing hard, but alive. She turned to Leon, who was staring in shock. Come on, she said softly. We're not done yet. They disappeared into the mist, running toward the tracks and the uncertain dawn beyond them. The sun had not fully risen when Mira and Leon reached the edge of Aaronsfield. The once busy town now looked like a ghost of itself. Broken buildings stood like silent guards, and the streets were still wet from last night's rain. Smoke rose from a distance where the Syndicate had set fire to an old warehouse, the one they had escaped from only hours earlier. Leon's shoulder still hurt, but the bleeding had stopped. Mira had tied it neatly before they left, using strips of her own coat. She walked ahead, silent as always, her eyes scanning the path. We're almost there, she said quietly. Leon followed her gaze. Beyond the last row of houses stretched a long, empty plain covered in mist. In the distance, rusty train tracks disappeared into the fog. That's the old line? He asked. Yes, Mira replied. If we follow it long enough, it will take us to the Outlands. Once we cross that border, the Syndicate can't easily follow. Leon frowned. Can't easily? That doesn't sound very safe. Mira looked at him and gave a faint smile. Nothing's safe anymore. For a while, they walked in silence. The mist hung low, wrapping around them like a living thing. Every few minutes, Mira would stop, listen carefully, then continue walking. Leon watched her move. She was cautious but graceful, like someone who had learned long ago that one mistake could mean death. He noticed how her eyes kept searching the horizon, how her hand never left the handle of the small dagger on her belt. He wanted to ask her more questions about her past, but something in her expression told him she wasn't ready. After nearly an hour, they reached an old bridge where the tracks crossed a narrow river. The wood beneath their feet creaked, but it held. Mira stopped halfway and looked down at the water below. "It's strange," she said softly. "When I first escaped the Deathworld, I thought crossing a river meant freedom. But freedom isn't just about running away. It's about finding something worth living for." Leon leaned against the railing. "Did you ever find it?" Mira didn't answer right away. The wind moved her hair, and for a moment she looked younger, like a girl who had once dreamed of better days. "I'm still looking," she said finally. Leon smiled faintly. "Maybe you already found it. You just haven't realized yet." Mira gave him a curious look. "And what makes you think that?" He shrugged. "Because you could have left me back there." "You didn't." Mira looked away, but there was warmth in her eyes. "You sound like your brother," she said quietly. "He used to talk like that too." At the mention of Aaron, the air between them grew heavy again. Leon lowered his gaze. "I keep thinking about him," he said. "What he went through, what he must have felt. I wish I could have been there." "You wouldn't have survived," Mira said softly. "He barely did. The Deathworld isn't a place anyone can face twice." Leon looked at her, curiosity burning in his eyes. "What was it like?" "The Deathworld?" Mira hesitated, then began walking again. "It's not something words can describe," she said. "It's not just a place. It's a test. It shows you what you really are, and what you're willing to become to stay alive." They walked side by side, her words hanging in the air. By noon the mist began to fade, revealing a landscape of dry fields and abandoned factories. The tracks stretched endlessly before them. Crows flew overhead, their cries echoing in the emptiness. Leon's steps slowed. "Do you think we can really make it?" Mira glanced at him. "We don't have a choice." She paused suddenly, motioning for him to stop. She crouched low, pressing her hand to the ground. The faint vibration beneath the tracks made her eyes narrow. "They're coming," she said. Leon looked around nervously. "The Syndicate." "Yes," she said, standing quickly. "Vehicles. We need to get off the line." They ran toward the hills beside the tracks just as the distant roar of engines filled the air. A convoy of black armored cars rolled through the mist, their headlights cutting through the gray. From their hiding spot behind a rock, Leon watched as the Syndicate soldiers searched the tracks. Drones hovered above, scanning the area. "They're not giving up," he whispered. "They never do," Mira replied. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were hard. After a few tense minutes, the vehicles moved on, disappearing down the tracks. Only then did Mira relax slightly. Leon sighed. "How long do you think we can keep running?" "As long as we have to," she said. "The Outlands aren't far now." Later that afternoon, they found shelter in an old train station. The building was crumbling, its windows broken, its walls covered in faded posters. Inside, they built a small fire using broken wood from old benches. Leon sat near the fire, holding his shoulder. The wound ached less now, but the memory of the fight still burned in his mind. Mira sat opposite him, sharpening her dagger. The firelight reflected in her eyes, making them seem almost golden. "Do you ever stop preparing for a fight?" Leon asked with a small smile. "Not when the world keeps trying to kill you," she replied, but there was a hint of humor in her voice. Leon leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "You know, when I first saw you, I thought you were a monster." Mira raised an eyebrow. "And now?" "Now," he said, "I think you're just someone who forgot how to stop fighting." Mira looked at him for a long time before answering. "Maybe you're right," she said softly. "When you spend too long surviving, you forget what living feels like." Her voice trembled slightly, and Leon could tell that behind her calm mask, there was pain, deep and old. He wanted to say something, but before he could, Mira suddenly stood. She had heard something outside. She moved to the window, her hand on the dagger. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. Leon stood too, tense. "The Syndicate." Mira shook her head. "No. These steps are lighter." A moment later, a small figure appeared at the door, a child no older than 10 holding a lantern. His clothes were torn and his face was covered in dirt. "Please," the boy said weakly. "Don't hurt me." Mira knelt down slowly. "We won't," she said softly. "Who are you?" "My name's Eli," the boy whispered. "I live near the fields. The soldiers came this morning. They took everyone. My parents. They didn't come back." Leon's heart sank. "The Syndicate." he said quietly. Mira looked at the boy with gentle eyes. You're safe now, she told him. Stay close to us. Eli nodded, tears mixing with the dirt on his face. That night, the three of them stayed in the station. Mira gave the boy her blanket and he fell asleep near the fire. Leon watched as she sat quietly, staring into the flames. You care about him? Leon said softly. Mira nodded slowly. He reminds me of someone I once knew, she said. Someone I couldn't save. Leon didn't press further. He could see that whatever memory she carried still hurt deeply. After a long silence, he said, When we reach the Outlands, what will you do? Mira didn't look at him. I'll find someone who can decode this, she said, tapping the small metal chip she kept hidden in her pocket. Once the world knows the truth, maybe the Syndicate will fall. And after that? Leon asked. Mira smiled faintly. After that, maybe I'll finally stop running. He looked at her, his voice quiet. Then I'll run with you until you can. Mira turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes. For the first time, something gentle passed between them. Not romance, but understanding. Two broken souls sharing the same storm. Before dawn, Mira woke suddenly. She felt something, a vibration in the floorboards. Engines again. She shook Leon awake. They found us, he stood quickly. The boy, I've got him, Mira said, lifting Eli into her arms. We need to move. They ran out the back of the station just as Syndicate trucks appeared from the road. Searchlights swept across the field. This way, Mira called, leading them into the forest beyond the tracks. They ran through the tall grass, their breaths visible in the cold air. Behind them, voices shouted orders. The light of the fires grew brighter. Finally, they reached a rocky hill. Mira climbed first, pulling Eli up, then helping Leon. From the top, they could see the faint outline of a metal gate in the distance, tall and covered in vines. The border, Mira said, pointing. That's the Outlands. But before they could move, a loud explosion lit up the night sky. One of the Syndicate vehicles had fired a flare and soldiers were moving fast. Leon turned to her, his face pale. We won't make it in time. Mira looked at him, her jaw tight. We will. We have to. She took a deep breath, then handed him the metal chip. If something happens to me, you take this and keep running. Don't stop no matter what. Leon shook his head. I'm not leaving you. You have to, she said firmly. Your brother died for this. Don't let his death mean nothing. The fire in her voice made him fall silent. Then, without another word, she turned and started running toward the gate, the boy in her arms. Then close behind, the soldiers shouted from behind them. Gunfire echoed through the air, but Mira didn't slow down. The world around them became a blur of smoke, fire, and light. When they finally reached the gate, Mira stopped and looked back at Leon. Go, she shouted. Leon grabbed Eli's hand and ran through the opening. Mira followed, but as she crossed, a blast threw her to the ground. Leon turned, shouting her name, but the smoke swallowed her. The explosion painted the night sky in shades of orange and gray. Smoke rose high, swallowing the stars. Leon coughed, trying to see through the dust. His ears rang from the blast, and the ground beneath him trembled as if the earth itself was crying. Mira, he shouted, his voice lost in the roar. Beside him, Eli clung to his arm, trembling. The boy's face was streaked with tears and dirt. She fell, he whispered. She fell back there. Leon turned toward the smoke. His chest tightened with fear. He could barely see, but he refused to leave. Stay here, he told Eli firmly. Don't move. He ran back through the haze, stumbling over rocks and broken metal. Flames flickered in the wreckage of what used to be the border gate. His lungs burned with every breath, but he didn't stop until he saw her. Mira lay near a pile of debris, motionless. Her coat was torn, her face covered in soot, but she was alive, barely. Mira! Leanne knelt beside her, lifting her head carefully. Can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open, and she managed a weak smile. You made it, she whispered. So did you, he said quickly, but his voice shook. We need to get out of here. She tried to sit up, but pain shot through her body. No, she said, forcing her breath. Take Eli, get him through the gate. I'll follow. Leon shook his head. I'm not leaving you again. Mira's gaze softened. You're stubborn, she murmured. Just like your brother. Before he could reply, the sound of engines filled the air again. The Syndicate wasn't done. Their lights cut through the smoke, and figures moved closer. They're coming, Leon said. Mira's eyes narrowed. Then we don't have much time. She reached for her dagger, pushing herself to her knees despite the pain. Leon tried to help, but she waved him off. "Go," she said firmly. "Protect the boy." Leon hesitated. He wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him. It was the same look she had given him the night they first met. Fierce, unbreakable, alive. "Promise me," she said. "No matter what happens, you'll keep moving forward." Leon swallowed hard. "I promise." Mira smiled faintly. "Then go." Leon ran back toward the gate, his heart pounding. Behind him, he heard the first shots echo through the night. When he reached Eli, the boy was crouched near the fence, clutching the small metal chip Mira had given them. "Is she coming?" Eli asked in a trembling voice. Leon didn't answer. He took the boy's hand and pulled him through the broken gate. They stumbled into the outlands, leaving behind the smoke and fire. The world beyond the gate was nothing like Leon expected. It wasn't a wasteland or a battlefield. It was quiet, almost peaceful. The land stretched wide under a gray dawn, covered in tall grass that swayed in the cold wind. Eli looked around, confused. "This doesn't look dangerous." Leon shook his head. "No, but danger doesn't always look dangerous." They kept walking until the smoke faded behind them. When they finally stopped to rest, Leon looked back one last time. The syndicate's lights were gone. The only sound was the whisper of the wind through the grass. He wanted to believe that Mira had made it out too, that she was right behind them. But deep down, a part of him feared the truth. Hours passed. The sky turned from gray to pale blue. The air here felt cleaner, lighter, almost free. They found an old farmhouse near a river and decided to rest there. Eli sat by the window staring outside. "Do you think she's coming?" he asked again. Leon didn't know what to say. He stared at the metal chip in his hand, the one that had cost so much. "She said this holds the truth," he murmured. "Something the syndicate fears." Eli looked up. "What kind of truth?" Leon sighed. "Maybe the kind that can change everything." He remembered his brother's last message and the one that had led him here. "Find the girl from the Deathworld. She carries the answer." Now that girl was gone, or so he thought. That night, the sound of soft footsteps woke him. He opened his eyes, reaching instinctively for the small knife by his side. "Easy," came a familiar voice. Leon froze, his heart leaping. "Mira?" She stood in the doorway, covered in dirt and ash, her arm bleeding but her eyes still fierce. "You didn't really think I'd die that easily, did you?" she said with a faint smile. Leon laughed in relief, standing quickly. "You're insane," he said, half laughing, half crying. "You should have run." "I did," she said, stepping inside, "just in the wrong direction first." Eli ran to her, hugging her tightly. "You came back." Mira knelt down and hugged the boy, her voice soft. "Of course I did. I promised I wouldn't leave anyone behind." When she finally sat down, Leon helped her clean the wound on her arm. She winced but said nothing. "You saved us," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, we saved each other." As the night deepened, the three of them gathered around a small fire inside the farmhouse. The flames danced, casting soft light on their tired faces. Leon finally asked, "What's on that chip, Mira? Why is it so important?" Mira looked into the fire, her eyes distant. "It's a record," she said. "The syndicate kept it hidden for years. It proves that the Deathworld wasn't an accident." Leon frowned. "What do you mean?" "They created it," Mira said softly. "They wanted to test how much a human could endure, how much fear and pain could change a person. The Deathworld was their experiment." Eli's eyes widened in horror. "They made that place?" "Yes," she said. "They built it. And they sent thousands there to die. I was one of them." The room fell silent. Only the crackle of the fire filled the space. Leon's voice trembled. "Then how did you escape?" Mira's gaze dropped. "Someone helped me. A soldier who saw what was really happening. He gave me this chip and told me to run. I think..." She hesitated. "I think it was your brother." Leon froze. "What?" "He never told me his name," she said. "But he looked like you. He said he had a younger brother who still believed in good. Before he died, he made me promise I'd find you." Leon's eyes filled with tears. The weight of her words hit him like a storm. "So he saved you?" Mira nodded. "And now we save everyone else." The next morning, they prepared to move again. Mira knew the syndicate wouldn't stop until they destroyed every trace of the truth. "We can't stay here," she said. "If they track us, they'll burn this place down too." Leon nodded. Where do we go? There's an old communication tower deep in the outlands, Mira said. If we can reach it, we can broadcast what's on the chip to the world. Eli looked uncertain. Isn't that dangerous? Mira smiled softly. Everything worth doing is. And so they began their journey again, through the quiet fields, across rivers and broken bridges. The outlands were vast and wild, filled with old ruins and forgotten towns. But something was different here. The people they met were not slaves of fear. They were free, though tired, survivors who had escaped the syndicate's reach. One night, an old woman they met by a campfire told them, "The outlands are where the truth begins. Many have tried to bring it back to the world, but few make it." Mira listened quietly, her mind set. Then maybe it's our turn. Days turned into weeks. Leon and Mira grew closer, not as lovers but as comrades bound by the same pain. They learned to trust each other completely. Sometimes when they rested at night, Leon would catch Mira staring at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" he'd ask. "About what it means to live," she'd reply softly. "For so long I thought surviving was enough. But maybe living means fighting for something more than yourself." "And what about after?" he'd ask. "When the fighting's done?" Mira would smile faintly. "Maybe I'll finally learn how to rest." One evening they finally saw it, the tall shadow of the old communication tower rising from the hills. It was rusted, broken in places, but still standing like a ghost of the old world. Mira looked at it with quiet determination. "That's where it ends," she said. Leon looked at her. "Or where it begins." But before they could move closer, Mira's expression changed. She dropped to a crouch, motioning for silence. A faint red light flashed in the distance. "Drones," she whispered. "They found us again." Eli gripped Leon's hand tightly. "What do we do?" Mira's eyes hardened. "We keep moving. We don't stop now." And with that, they ran toward the tower, the sound of engines once again following them. The storm that never stopped. The night air was cold and thin as Mira, Leon, and Eli climbed the hill toward the old communication tower. The tower rose like a giant skeleton against the moon, its metal bones broken, its surface covered in rust. A soft wind whistled through the gaps, carrying the faint echo of old world machines that had long stopped working. For days they had traveled without rest, hunted by the syndicate's drones. Now this was their final chance. If they failed here, the truth about the Deathworld would vanish forever. Leon looked up at the tower, worry in his eyes. "Are you sure this thing still works?" Mira nodded slowly. "If we can reach the top and connect the chip to the main console, it will send the data to every remaining signal hub in the world. After that, the truth will spread on its own." Eli clutched Mira's hand tightly. "What if they find us before we finish?" Mira smiled softly, brushing his hair back. "Then we'll make sure they don't stop us." Leon looked at her, not with fear but admiration. In all the chaos, she still carried calmness like armor. She had been broken, scarred, and hunted, yet she stood taller than anyone he had ever known. They entered the base of the tower. The air inside smelled of dust and metal. Old wires hung from the ceiling, and faint blue lights blinked from ancient screens. Mira pulled out the metal chip from her pocket. The small object shimmered faintly under the weak light. "This is what they feared most," she said quietly. "Not a weapon, not an army, just truth." Leon nodded. "Then let's give it to the world." They began to climb. The metal stairs creaked under their feet. With every step, the wind grew stronger. Halfway up, they stopped to rest. The world stretched below them, endless fields of gray, dotted with old ruins and shadows moving in the distance. Eli peered down nervously. "It's so high," Mira smiled. "That's good. The higher we go, the further the signal will reach." When they finally reached the top, they found an old control room. Broken panels covered the walls, and dust floated through the light from the shattered windows. In the middle of the room stood a large computer console, covered with vines and rust. Mira wiped the dust away and opened a small hatch. "Still works," she said with quiet relief. "It's running on backup power." Leon stood beside her, watching her movements carefully. "How do you even know how to use this?" Mira smiled faintly. "Someone taught me a long time ago." Before the Deathworld, she inserted the chip into the console. The screen flickered, then glowed faintly. Lines of data appeared, codes, maps, images. Eli stared in awe. "Is that it?" Mira nodded. "It's starting." But before they could breathe, the sound of engines echoed from below. Leon rushed to the window. Down the hill, several syndicate vehicles were approaching fast, headlights slicing through the dark. "They found us," he said. Mira didn't look up from the console. "Then we finish this before they arrive." Leon grabbed his weapon and checked the few rounds left. "I'll hold them off as long as I can." Mira turned to him. "You don't have to—" "I promised your brother I'd protect you," Leon interrupted with a small smile. "Even if you're better at it than I am." For a brief moment, Mira's eyes softened. "Be careful," she said. "Always," he replied, though both knew it wasn't true. Leon ran down the stairs, leaving Mira and Eli at the top. Outside, the roar of engines grew louder. The syndicate soldiers poured from their trucks, armed and determined. Leon took cover behind an old metal crate and began firing. Sparks lit up the dark hillside. He wasn't aiming to win, just to buy time. "Come on, Mira," he whispered through clenched teeth. "Finish it." Inside the tower, Mira worked quickly. Her hands flew over the console as she rerouted power and bypassed old security locks. The system resisted at first, but she refused to stop. Sweat ran down her forehead. Eli watched, wide-eyed. "They're coming closer, aren't they?" "Yes," Mira said. "But so is the truth." Finally, the console beeped. "Signal ready for transmission." She smiled, almost in disbelief. "We did it, but then—" The screen flickered again. A red warning flashed. "External connection interference detected." Her heart sank. The syndicate had activated a signal jammer from below. If she didn't disable it, the broadcast would fail. She turned to Eli. "Stay here." "Don't move, and where are you going?" the boy asked, frightened. "Just a short climb," she said softly. "If I can reach the top antenna, I can bypass their signal block." The wind howled as Mira climbed the ladder to the roof. The sky above was heavy with clouds, the moon glowing faintly behind them. She reached the antenna, tall, broken, but still connected. She began to rewire the circuits manually, her fingers shaking in the cold. Sparks flew as she crossed the wires. Below, she could hear distant shouting, Leon's voice mixed with the roar of the engines. "Mira!" Leon called from below. "They're breaking through!" She shouted back, "Just one more minute." Down the hill, Leon fought with everything he had. His shoulder burned with pain, his weapon nearly empty. He saw the syndicate soldiers advancing, dark silhouettes against the headlights. When he ran out of bullets, he grabbed a broken pipe from the ground. He wasn't giving up. Not now. Above him, Mira's voice echoed through the storm. And then, suddenly, the tower lights flickered. She had done it. Inside the console room, Eli saw the screen flash green. "Signal transmission active!" He gasped and shouted upward, "Mira! It's working!" From every broken speaker across the tower, a message began to play. Mira's voice, calm and steady, recorded into the system. "To whoever still listens, this is Mira of the Deathworld. The Syndicate built that place, not to protect you, but to test you. They created fear and pain to control those who survived. But you deserve to know the truth. The world can only heal if the lies are burned away." Her words spread like fire through the static. Across the outlands, old screens flickered back to life. In the Syndicate's cities, alarms began to sound as the data leaked into their systems. The truth was out, but victory came with a cost. As the signal broadcasted, the Syndicate soldiers turned their weapons toward the tower. One of them aimed a launcher. Leon saw it and shouted, "No!" The explosion hit the base of the tower, shaking it violently. The metal frame groaned. Eli screamed as debris fell around him. "Mira!" he cried. "The tower's falling!" At the top, Mira felt the structure sway. She grabbed the ladder, trying to climb down, but the wind tore at her and the metal cracked beneath her hands. "Leon!" she shouted. He looked up, covered in dust, reaching toward her. "Jump!" But before she could, the tower gave a loud metallic scream and began to collapse. Everything happened in slow motion. Mira fell through smoke and sparks, her body weightless for a moment before she hit the ground hard. Leon ran to her, ignoring the pain in his legs. "Mira!" he shouted, kneeling beside her. She opened her eyes weakly. "Did it work?" Leon nodded, tears falling. "You did it. The whole world heard you." A faint smile touched her lips. "Then it was worth it." Eli ran to her side, clutching her hand. "Don't go," he cried. Mira brushed his cheek gently. "Hey, no tears. You're free now. Both of you." Leon held her hand tightly. "You can't leave us. Not now." She looked at him, calm, steady, and brave. just like she had been since the moment they met. "I'm not leaving," she said softly. "I'm just going home." Her eyes slowly closed and the wind carried her final breath into the open sky. The sun rose over the outlands the next morning. Smoke still rose from the broken tower, but the world had changed. The truth had spread. Across cities and towns, people awakened to the reality of the Syndicate's crimes. Their control began to crumble. Leon stood on the hill beside Eli, watching the light touch the horizon. He felt pain, but also peace. Eli tugged his hand. "What now?" Leon looked down at the boy and smiled softly. "Now we start again." For her, they buried Mira near the river under a tree that faced the sunrise. Leon placed her dagger in the soil and whispered, "You fought enough. Rest now." As he stood, the wind moved gently through the grass, soft and calm, almost like a voice whispering goodbye. Days later, Leon found himself walking through a small settlement at the edge of the outlands. The people there had heard the message. They were gathering, planning, ready to rebuild a world without fear. Someone recognized him and said, "You were with the Deathworld girl, weren't you?" "The one who told the truth?" Leon smiled faintly. "Yes, her name was Mira." The man nodded with respect. "She changed everything." Leon looked up at the sky, bright and endless now, and whispered, "She always did." Epilogue years later, the Deathworld became a forbidden name, a reminder of what humanity had done and survived. The Syndicate fell, replaced by free communities. And in every town, someone had painted a mural of a girl with calm eyes, wind in her hair, standing tall beneath the words, "You done?" Because she had faced the world's worst and still chose to hope. And somewhere in the quiet wind of the outlands, her voice still echoed. Steady, fearless, eternal. Truth always survives.